So it could also be looked at as the idea of non-duality, not two. And the movement of not two would be a negation rather than an affirmation or an acquisition. So a lot of things that we meet in spiritual practice, or let's say in trying to stop suffering, is like an acquisition, an acquiring. So there's a me, let's say I don't feel good, so I'm going to do a bunch of movement in order to get out of the sense of not feeling good, which would put me in the position of feeling good. Yeah, so that's obviously a duality, not feeling good and then moving towards, okay, now I'm going to feel good. So that would be like the affirmative movement. This is pointing out a negation more so. Whatever arises as two-ness is not your nature. So that is kind of the apparent overlying of the idea of not two, at least from this understanding here, yeah. So it's a negation rather than an affirmation or an acquiring. I tried the route of affirmation and acquiring, and it failed me. It failed me, essentially. Trying to become a thing of not two, or see through the eyes of oneness, seeing through these eyes which can only see two-ness. So rather than negating that these eyes would be my nature, I was trying to make these eyes see not two-ness, and that couldn't happen. Not because I was a failing or something, but because it can't happen. Yeah, this body cannot become a not body. So this idea of not two is really just that. Whatever pops up in two-ness is not your nature. Yeah, and nor is it not your true nature, but the two-ness cannot go beyond that sense of two-ness. So the sense of J cannot get out of the sense of J as the sense of J. It's like in recovery, self cannot get out of self. Individuality cannot get out of individuality. The feeling of being the body cannot get out of the feeling of being the body. The message is that you're not the feeling of being the body. Yeah. So the inquiry really is into the I, or the sense of being that body. In order to see that you're not the body, nor are you the sense of I, which is arising within that body. It's beautiful in a way because it's saying that what you're trying to do or complete is already completed. Yeah? So the more effort of trying to do and complete and attain a certain place is a kind of a miss-effort, because it's tying you to the doing of trying to get somewhere where the message says you already are there. Yeah? So you already are what you're looking for. Whatever is looking for that must not be your nature. So J was looking to get out of J for a long, long time, in different ways, yeah. Mostly drinking, and then spiritual practice. J was trying to get out of J, and that failed. But this message is beautiful because it says whatever is trying to get out of J cannot get out of J. J-ness cannot get beyond the J-ness because it's a dualistic thing, yeah? When my head met spiritual practice, it claimed that spiritual practice and it went off with it. It was like the new addiction for for me. Spiritual practice was my next addiction after the alcohol. Yeah? And I was going to dominate spiritual practice as the spiritual practitioner, meaning that I was going to use spiritual practice as a spiritual practitioner to get out of identification as the spiritual practitioner. But it didn't work. Yeah? I had hoped that the identity of spiritual practitioner would be better than the identity of judgmental alcoholic, and it didn't work, essentially. But I'm not the judgmental alcoholic, nor am I the spiritual practitioner. So it was the same movement, just moving over. Yeah? And this message brought forth that negation. So rather than trying to become the spiritual practitioner who doesn't see judgmentally, it was presented that you're not the spiritual practitioner either. So you're not the judgmental alcoholic, nor are you the spiritual practitioner, which, by the way, became super judgmental through the spirituality, or the idea of being the spiritual practitioner placed this body in the place of spiritual practitioner, therefore others are incorrect spiritual practitioners, which is ironically super two-ness in its own sense. And both of them failed. Yeah. So the head doesn't really love this message because there's nothing to get. And the mental system always wants to get something. It's in the business of acquiring. So a lot of people come to these talks, and when negation is presented, they leave. Yeah, because the mental system has them in the business of getting stuff, becoming something. Yeah? This message says you already are. So what's becoming, which you're identified as, you actually negate that movement because you are what you're looking for, yeah? So the head doesn't really love the message of not to, because we're talking about that movement. We're talking about the movement, not making the movement better, but highlighting the movement so that it can then be negated. And then the head kind of like shivers in a way, or freaks out, because it sees that it's not going to get anything out of this. It's actually put on the questioning stand in the courtroom, the mental system. Let's look at something here from Ramana. Go to one of the classics, one of Ramana Maharshi's classics. Who Am I? This is all over the place. I found it in this book, Words of Grace, in Theravada, but it's all over the place. Yeah. One of the three main things that Ramana himself wrote. I'm just going to pick a few sentences. The whole thing is a few pages when I do that. So he says here, unless the illusory nature of the perception of the world as an objective reality ceases, the vision of the true nature of the self, of course Ramana says big S self being our true nature, on which the illusion is formed, is not obtained. So unless the illusory nature of the perception of the world as an objective reality ceases, so unless we stop taking the world to be an objective reality, the world as an objective reality would mean that the world has its own inherent existence, and the things which are seen as objects have their own autonomous reality, meaning that they have their own autonomy separate from everything else. So he's already saying this is an illusion. Unless the illusory nature of the perception of the world as an objective reality ceases, the vision of the true nature of the self on which the illusion is formed is not obtained. So he's pointing to that, obviously, the world being having an objective autonomous reality is illusory. Yeah? And it's illusory based on the illusory subjectivity of the mental system. So the head is giving the meaning to the world, yeah? And the senses are parsing out the world. So there's a wall, there's a computer, there's a fan, whatever, yeah? There's all these different things, and between the senses and the brain, the mental capacity, it's separating the world into autonomous pieces. And he's saying that's an illusion, yeah? That's a bunch of objects seen as autonomous pieces, which is illusory, based on a subject, yeah? There can only be objects to a sense of subjectivity. Without a sense of subjectivity, there cannot be objects. So there's an illusory world, essentially, which he's saying is taken to be real from the standpoint of a real subject. Reality meaning they have their own existence. The wall has its own existence. The fan has its own existence. The computer, whatever. The body has its own existence, yeah? Separate from everything else. So unless the illusory nature of the perception of the world as an objective reality ceases. Now, the objective reality of the world is based on the subjective view of J, the mental system. So the investigation, if you know from Ramana's stuff, if you don't, it's fine, is into the subjective, because without the sense of subjectivity, there's no objects. Yeah? So the investigation is into the sense of me being the subject, which is giving the meaning to the objects. So the objective reality of the world is illusory because the sense of subjectivity as a reality is also illusory. Yeah? So he's saying, unless you see the illusory nature of the objective reality in the world, the vision of the true nature of self, on which the illusion is formed, is not obtained. So by seeing that the subjectivity, which is giving meaning to the objective world, subjectivity being illusory, meaning that the sense of J as the subject and the meaning giver to the objective world is also an illusion. Meaning there is no J inside this body aside from a thought. Yeah? A thought of me or I. And that thought of me or I gives the sense of subjectivity, which is then giving meaning to a world as objective. So this is illusory as separate, and the world is illusory as separate. Unless that is seen, the vision of the true nature of the self, on which the illusion is formed. Yes, so if you go back to the 5 verses, I think it's called the 5 verses on reality from Ramana. He talks about the movie, the screen, and then the movie which is projected onto the screen. And that's what he's talking about here. So unless we see that the sense of subjectivity, me or I, that sense giving reality to a bunch of objectiveness, are both illusory, then we cannot see that this is arising on a screen, or that the illusion is formed on a screen. So open space, let's say, being our nature. Open space. The thought I pops out of that open space, the thought me. So there is presented a subjectivity. From that subjectivity, the mental system and the senses give meaning to everything in the world, and they're seeing them as an objective reality. So he's saying the objective reality of the world is false. The subjective stance from which that objective reality is given meaning as reality is an illusion as well. There is no subject in here aside from the thought I. He is saying that that I pops up through open space, which would be the screen on which this whole movie plays. Yeah. And then there's another thing Ramana says somewhere else, but he says the only thing that's needed is to see the unreal. So what we're taking to be real is of the unreal. So the sense of me, or the thought I or me inside the body, which is taken to be a thing, like a thing called J. When the head says I, it sees this body. Yeah? Now that sense of me is taking that to be reality. So from the sense of I, when the head comes up with whatever it comes up with, it's pertaining to that I-ness. And from that I-ness, whatever the head says about the world is taken to be true in reference to the I, the thought me. Yeah? And then the head is supposing or presupposing that the thought me is a thing, this body. This is the investigation of not two, really. You see? Because there's two things. There's a sense of subjectivity, me, and then that's giving meaning to a bunch of objects. Without the subjectivity, there are no objects. Yeah? The two-ness is negated. So the not two is a negation of this two-ness. I'm not the wall, which is the object, nor am I the seer of the wall. I'm not the thought, which is the object, nor am I the thinker of that thought. Good. There's another part in here where he says, nor is there any such thing as the physical world apart from and independent of thought. That's amazing. Nor is there any such thing as the physical world apart from and independent from thought. So there's no thing known as a physical world apart from thought. And now all those thoughts which are telling me what the physical world is pertain to the sense of me. Yeah? If they didn't pertain to me, there wouldn't be a listening to those thoughts. Yeah? If all the thoughts in your head did not pertain to you, you would not care about those thoughts. But it's the sense that those thoughts arise to you which gives them tons of meaning. And now the world has no meaning without those thoughts. Except those thoughts are seeing the world from a conditioned response. Meaning the mental only knows wall because it's conditioned when it sees that through these eyes to say wall. Other than that, past interpretation of what is happening, the wall has no meaning. Essentially, there is no wall. Yeah? Nor is there any such thing as a physical world apart from and independent of thought. That highlights so much, I feel. Because when people are freaking out about life and the world, it's from their standpoint as a mental. Because the world has no meaning apart from the thought that their head is giving that world. That to me is beautiful because it narrows down suffering. Not to the world. I don't have to look at the world. It's just looking at the mental system. So it really narrows down what the problem is in many ways. Because there is no physical world independent or apart from thought. Yeah? Which means thinking nor world are independent. There's a sense of subjectivity which is giving objects meaning. Those objects are getting meaning from the sense of subjectivity. You are not the objects, you are not the subjectivity either. So when the head is giving tons of meaning to the world, man, it's a conditioned meaning based on the past. And I feel like for most people it's from the standpoint of less than. So if you see that, and you see that it's conditioned on the past, it really helps you lose faith in that thinking. And then the world will go on, yeah? Man, that's so good. It's just like in the Course, they say you give everything all the meaning that it has. So the mental system's conditioning is giving the world meaning. That thinking is getting meaning from the sense of me or I. And that sense of me or I is getting meaning from the space in which it arises. And you are not that thought, I. When that thought arises in the body, you are not that thought. You exist as existence before that thought, not as a body. Before I pops up, you exist before that. Yeah? So world, thinking, giving world meaning, the sense of me, giving thinking meaning. Oh. And the me, this idea or thought I, is getting meaning from what is aware of that, which would be awareness. You are not the world, you are not the thinking, you are not the I. Awareness would be before that. I guess that's pretty much as far as you can go, and grace takes care of the rest, yeah? So, am I the world? No. Am I the thoughts that give world meaning? No. Am I the eyes that see world? No. These are all of two-ness, yes? Then there's thoughts, then there's the sense of being me, the thinker. Am I the thoughts? No. Am I the thinker? No. Am I the one that knows I'm not the thoughts nor the thinker? No. Negation, yeah? So the screen idea is really amazing here from what we read before. Unless the illusory nature of the perception of the world as an objective reality ceases, the vision of the true nature of self, on which the illusion is formed, which means, it's so good. The screen and the movie thing is so good. Anything that pops up in the screen of awareness can just be negated, essentially. You can let go of your grip on what pops up in the screen. It's like the Huangpo or Nisargadatta thing. What is being perceived is not what is perceiving. Yeah? So whatever is perceived, whatever pops up in the screen of awareness can be negated as your nature. Not as a dispute, yeah? As a fact. As a fact. Because the world has no meaning aside from what the head says. And then you can see the head freaking out about the world. Yeah? Pertaining primarily to self-centeredness, because the thinking is all based on the sense of self. So the head freaking out about the world has a lot to do with the sense of me, essentially. Because it's freaking out about the world in relation to the sense of me. What's happening with me? How is this going to affect me? I don't have enough money. I need this. This relationship is not going well. Yeah? In accordance to what? Me. So the head is giving all these things meaning, yeah, based on the groundwork of me, and there is no me. Me is one of the ideas, one of the thoughts. It's beautiful. If you come from the land of that I've come from, it's beautiful. Because there's so much relief. The head is giving meaning. Based on what? Past conditioning. So I'm not even doing that, because there is no doer. The head is just shooting meaning out. Yeah? And then who is that head arising to? Who are those thoughts popping up to? Me. Well, there is no me. So it would be really worth investigating this, who am I? What is the I? Yeah? Because Buddhism says there is no I. And Advaita says you are what you're looking for, which is existence, consciousness, bliss. So it must not be the experience of this. And that rhymes, so it's got to be true. Man, that's like crazy amount of relief. Because my head would always talk to me in relation to the world being better than me, which puts me in a position of constantly not being good enough. And then that causes a bunch of depression, a bunch of drinking, and a bunch of anxiety. Yeah. Then I'm trying to get out of that, but I was always trying to get out of it as me. Yeah? But all of that meaning that's given to the world is a conditioned meaning based on the past that this head has met. So it doesn't exist beyond what my head is saying. And that to me is amazing, because I can quit it, because I'm not it. Yeah? Because all of those depressive thoughts of me being worse and not being good enough and having to work harder and doing more spiritual practice is all based on the sense of me. And there is no me. So when you go and look for the sense of I, that all these thoughts are talking to, it ain't there, essentially. And that's a great news. That's great news. Because you are the screen of open space in which this movie plays. And that's a ton of relief, for me at least. When I read that, there's a lot of relief in that. Wow. Beautiful. I'm just looking at what's after that. Then he says, the world is perceived as an apparent objective reality when the mind is externalized. The mind is externalized through the senses, yeah? Thereby forsaking its identity with the self. When the world is thus perceived, the true nature of the self is not revealed. So when things are externalized through the senses, the space or the screen on which life moves through is not revealed. And then he says, conversely, when the self is realized, the world ceases to appear as an objective reality. So when you sit back into what you are, being the screen on which all of life moves, then the world ceases to have an objective reality, meaning its own autonomous pieces, each piece having its own reality. Now you are reality. So the only way to sit back into what you are, meaning to not identify with the unreal, would be negation. There can be no attainment as far as the head is concerned, because the head is part of the unreal. There's a subjective sense of me, and that is unreal me. But as long as I'm listening to that subjective sense of I, then I'm seeing from an illusory subjectivity, which is then perceiving a bunch of objects as separateness. So it's great. The great news is you are what you're looking for, yeah? So you are the screen. The screen is always there on which life plays. It's always there, ever present. It's the only maybe ever present aspect. Everything else comes and goes through that open space. Self is realized, the world is superior. Right. Yeah. So the movement then is negation. Whatever pops up in the screen of awareness can be negated as your as reality or as your nature, which is good because there's only negation. Yeah, there doesn't have to be an acquisition or an affirming of okay, I'm there or something. It's a negation. Whatever pops up is not your true nature. The only requirement is to see the unreal. What is being perceived is not what is perceiving. What is being heard is not the hearing of what's being heard. Oh, it's a question. Peter, Florida. It's all based on neuroplasticity, correct? No. No, this isn't about changing the thinking. Trying to change the thinking is self trying to get out of self. And self cannot get out of self. Thinking cannot go beyond thinking. And most thinking is based on core beliefs, which even schools of psychology argue you cannot change. So neuroplasticity, at least from what I know, and I don't know much about whatever that stuff, neuroplasticity would be about changing the thinking. Changing the thinking is what failed. That's why we're here. Yeah, that's what failed me. Changing the thinking did not work because it's based on core beliefs like I'm less than, or the idea of being impoverished, so I'm always having to do more to obtain more, to not be impoverished, but it doesn't work because it's still based on the core belief of being impoverished, and the head cannot get enough. Yeah? So neuroplasticity, at least from what I understand, would be changing the thinking. This is about seeing that you're not the thinker of those thoughts. Because those thoughts are conditioned. And from what's the word I was looking for? Yeah, those thoughts are conditioned. And there is no doer of those thoughts. That's what it is. In Advaita, they talk a lot about non-doership. Yeah, so there's a sense that you're doing all of that thinking. Advaita is negating that sense as what you are. This isn't about changing. The mental system will never get this message. This message is about the mental system. And then the mental system tries to grab on to the message of not two, but it can't find it because it sees only through two-ness. And the mental system and the sense of me cannot get beyond that sense of two-ness. That's why the movement is negation of that mental system. Yeah? And more so who that mental system arises to, me. The base of the reading from Ramana is who am I? So trying to use the head to change the head to see a better head, that fails. That doesn't work. Yeah? At least in this experience, that does not work. I've tried that through alcoholism and spiritual practice and all kinds of stuff, and it just constantly fails. So giving up on changing the head was probably the most beneficial thing that happened here. And the inquiry is, who does that mental system arise to? Yeah. And then you can stop trying to change the head and get the mental system into this perfect stance of being ever compassionate, because it can't do it. The mental system cannot do it. It's judgmental and it's obtuseness. So if it sits one way, it's going the other way at some point. Yeah. And that's not a solution to me or an alcoholic, yeah? Because if it's swinging back and forth, then I'm still very uncomfortable. And living as a self, it's going to swing back and forth. The mental system's going to swing back and forth. So if that's my mental system, then I'm bound to it. And recovery is all about getting out of that bondage of self. Yeah. So by seeing that you're not the self which is bound, you are free from that forever. That's a solution. You've never been bound to the thinking. And if the thinking is not your thinking, then the interest in neuroplasticity is gonzo. Yeah. I don't really care so much about the thoughts because I'm not tied to the thoughts through the sense of me, because there's no me in there. Yeah. The me is a thought, and the sense of me will change just like the rest of the thoughts. So if I'm trying to change the me that the thoughts arise to, I'm going to be chasing a chicken that I can't catch. And I tried to chase that chicken. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's so good. There's so much relief in being relieved from having to try to change the thinking. Changing the thinking, man, was like trying to lift a bulldozer all day, every day. And it's super exhausting. Oh, seeing that you're not what the thinking arises to is amazing. Trying to kill the ego is impossible because the ego doesn't exist. Yeah? Seeing that you're the screen on which all of this arises is amazing. So the movie of life, Jay is part of that movie. Jay is not the screen. Jay is part of the movie. I, the sense of me and I, is part of the movie. And there was a time when I thought Jay was seeing the movie, but Jay's in the movie. Yeah. What you are is not in the movie. It's the screen on which the movie plays. But what we're identified as, the body and Jay, is part of the movie. Yeah. So I was always trying to get out of the movie, not seeing that I was in the sense of me is in the movie. Oh. That's amazing. But your subconscious mind will always talk in the background, so we have to observe those thoughts. Who is observing the thought is the inquiry, Peter. There's the sense that you are there observing those thoughts, yeah? That you puts you in a seat of two-ness, and the message is not two. So there's thoughts, and then there's the sense of you who's seeing those thoughts. Let's say that lands as the word me, or I am seeing the thought. That puts in a seat of two-ness, thoughts and the seer of those thoughts. And this is saying you are not two. So the mind or the subconscious or the subliminal conscious, it doesn't matter what it's called, it's all mind. Yeah? It will keep talking because it's conditioned. And there will be a seeing of that. But if there's a sense that I'm seeing the thoughts, then I'm bound to those thoughts. No matter how much I say I'm unbound from the thoughts as the seer, if I'm identified as the seer, I am in bondage to those thoughts. But there is no seer. So the inquiry is really into the seer. It's not into the seeing, but the sense of being the one who's seeing the thoughts. The sense of being the thinker of the thoughts, the seer of the sights, the hearer of the sounds. It's like in Chan, they say, who is hearing and listening, yeah? Or where is the root of hearing and listening? That is really the inquiry. Because the head will come back online at some point, because it's conditioned. You're not doing that. And then the head will go, okay, I'm seeing the thoughts, but you're not that I either. And when the head says I, it's seeing you as a body. But the I is part of the movie. The observer of thoughts is part of the movie. It's not of the screen. You see? And then the head will, yeah. So whether it's a conscious mind or subconscious mind, it's all of the mental. And it's all arising to the sense of me. And the inquiry is into the me. You can hear when your head says me. Not with the ears, of course, but from the space from which it comes, you can hear that me. Yes, and what is being heard is not what is hearing. What is being perceived is not what is perceiving. So you can perceive the me that's claiming to be the seer of the thoughts. This is why it's a negation. Yeah, whatever pops up in the screen of awareness can just get negated. As my nature, let's say. It's a relative sense of me. Relative meaning in relation, which would mean not separate or autonomous from the rest of the movie. Yeah? Which is exactly what Ramana's talking about there. The world only has meaning from the head. The head goes out, gives the meaning world, the head contracts back in and sits in its source, and the world has no meaning anymore. Because the head is giving it all of the meaning that it has. The thoughts have no meaning either, but they're given meaning from the sense of my thoughts. Or being the seer of those thoughts, they get tons of meaning. Yeah, the main meaning that they can get, which is that's the most meaning that thoughts can really get. When thoughts pop up, the most meaning you can give something is to be mine, as what I am, yeah? And when they're your thoughts, you're super bound, whether it's the mind or the subconscious or the superlateral or whatever mind we say, we're bound to it if there's a sense of me-ness. And there is a sense of me-ness, by the way, but you are not that sense. The sense is not a fact, we could say. Or like Paul Ederman says, there's a bunch of verbing happening, but there's no noun there. So there will be a seeing of those thoughts, and part of the seeing of those thoughts will present you as a seer, but there is no seer, there's just an open seeing. There's an open hearing of what's going on. Yeah, everything in the movie that's playing, body, mind, world, head giving world meaning, that's going on. There's a hearing of that, and then the head, the pivot point there is the me. The head is saying me. I'm hearing. I'm seeing. I'm talking. I'm doing. Me. Yeah? That me ties you to the contents of the experience. But there is no hearer. There's just a hearing. Yeah? And it's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. Because it gives a lot of relief from what's being heard, which for a lot of us is the head just trashing us in comparison to the world, yeah? But if there's no hearer and it's just open hearing, then we're unbound from what is being heard. Because what is being heard from the mental system is all conditioned. You're not doing that, yeah? But if there's a sense of being the hearer of what is being heard, if there's a sense that all those thoughts are my thoughts, then the head is presenting me as the doer of all of those thoughts. Yeah, which means I have to then try to undo all of those thoughts, which would be the neuroplasticity thing, but there is no doer. So when I try to undo all of those thoughts, it's tying me more to the idea of being the thinker of those thoughts. And then when they don't change, which is exactly what happened here, they didn't change that much, and they presented a bunch of old thoughts. It presented me as the failure. Again, not seeing that there's no me in front of those thoughts. That the idea of me is one of those thoughts. Yeah? And then those thoughts can change in many ways, not from me doing anything, but from me seeing that they're not my thoughts. And then there just being kind of a knowing that there is no me or I, which is the head is presenting in front of that thinking. Then the thinking loses its breath. Thoughts are only getting breath from the self-centered idea of me. Yeah? Without the me for those pumping those thoughts full of air, they don't get much breath, really, for the most part. So when the head goes out and gives the world a bunch of meaning as better than or scary or in reference to this body's position in that world of what I need more of and the getting this and this and this, if they're talking to a sense of me and that me is another one of those thoughts, if that's seen, then the meaning that the head is giving the world is really seen through for the most part. Yeah? And that's a huge relief. Because the head, the mental system is distorting the world. Primarily by seeing it as an objective separate reality. And that's what the Ramana reading is talking about. The mental system and the senses paint the world as a subjective, separate, autonomous reality. Which puts me in competition with the world. Yeah? Subject, object. Those objects seem to be autonomous from the subject, and therefore the subjectivity which feels less than is always trying to become more than, based on its past ideas, how the program was written, let's say. So I don't know if that helps. I hope it helps. And then you can watch the mental system try to get it. Try to understand through its dualistic framework this message, but it can't grab it because you are it. You are the message. So when the head pops up and tries to get it, it's just another part of the movie popping up in the screen that you can negate. Yeah? And then all the spiritual seeking of having to become and having to do this and having to purify more and more and this and this and this, you see that that's just part of the mental system trying to constantly get more. And you can stop going with it, thankfully. Wow. Thankfully. The biggest weight is being not spiritual and trying to become spiritual as a body. The movie cannot become not a movie. Yeah. It's like the dreaming thing, like this is the awake dream, yeah? The dreaming cannot get out of dreaming. You see that it's dreaming, essentially. Just like a dream at night, there's an awareness of that dream, except when the eyes open from sleep, this dream is like the awake dream. The dream of Jay, which is, and one of the tools of this dream has time. There was a Jay, there is a Jay, there's going to be a Jay. Yeah? And because of that timeness, let's say, this dream is taken to not be a dream. And that binds us really hard to this dream. Yeah. Nina. Some say when you die, you finally wake up. Ah. Well, hopefully that can happen before the body dies, yeah? Hopefully the body doesn't have to die. Yeah. Right. The thing is, the idea of I, or me, let's say, it's not alive in the way that there's a thing that's living. The idea of you comes and goes. Huh? When you go to sleep, you're gonzo. It's almost like what you're saying happens every day in a way. When you die, you finally wake up. Well, when you go to sleep, the idea of you goes away. Yeah, but something knows you're sleeping. So from before that, But when you wake up, the head comes back online and starts talking to you as you and suggesting there is a you. That's taken to be true, not by your fault, but it's presupposed, as Ramana would say, meaning the head already has you in the position of you being a body. So when those thoughts come up, they're taken to be yours. That's the presupposing, meaning that it's already supposed. You're not doing that, but it's already put in place, essentially, that idea. But when you go to sleep, that thing goes to sleep. It's non-existent, yeah, because it doesn't have existence. The idea of J is based on the screen on which it plays, the screen being existence, and this being a non-existent thing, existing only because of the screen on which it plays. Yeah. A lot of relief in that message. All right. So if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. You put them in the little chat box there if you'd like. I love what is being perceived is not what is perceiving, because it ends all of the head's negotiation. As soon as something pops up mentally, you see it's perceived. Perceived right away, because the screen, the open space on which that thing pops out, is ever present. Yeah, you are awake as awareness is awake. Doesn't get tired, doesn't move with what's moving through it. It's on. Yeah, now. Then the head pops up and is immediately perceived because it comes and goes through the ever awakeness, yeah, ever present awareness. So what is being perceived is not what is perceiving. As soon as your head starts to negotiate, you can perceive that. Yeah. And your head will try to negotiate. It will try to understand and get and conceptualize the unconceptual. That's why we talk about what gets negated here. Talking about true nature would put concepts on the non-conceptual. That is not going to get anywhere, yeah? But you can perceive what you're not. You can perceive that from the perceiving of which you already are. And then your head goes, oh, I'm that. And as soon as you see that pop up, you know that the head claiming is also not you. Yeah? That kaputs every movement in many ways as what you are. It might not kaput the movement because the movement is conditioned. It's a habit program. It's going to pop up. Yeah, like Peter said, well, it's going to pop up. That's right. But it doesn't mean that you're doing it or there's a doer in front of that movement. Because your head is perceiving and distorting world. Yeah, it's perceiving through its own interpretation. And it's placing you as the doer, which means you have to essentially pay for what the head says. But you're not doing the head. That's rough. In my life, that's been really rough. Because the head is interpreting the world from a stance of less than. And in the stance of less than, I am always less than. And if those thoughts and that interpretation is mine, then it's sticking that I'm doing those thoughts. And that's a rough place to be in, yeah? That is the bondage of self, like written in gold in many ways. The head is saying I'm less than, and then saying I'm the being done to by those thoughts and the doer of those thoughts. So I'm completely tied to the interpretation of being less than, despite the fact that there is no self and I'm not doing the thoughts. The head is presupposing me as the doer of those thoughts, and that is a rough. Because essentially whatever the head does, I'm getting skewered with that head. And then when I try to get out of it, I can't get out of it as it. But you're not it. That's the thing. That's the move. Mary Lou. Ontario. I'm in Ontario, Mary Lou. Although from your picture it looks like you're in a nicer part of Ontario. 12-step programs, super beneficial for the body. For the individual, super beneficial. The thing about program is beautiful that you say that. Super beneficial for the body and the head. Because by seeing that you're not the head, yeah, the mental system is conditioned. There's no doer of that mental system. So, let's say you see that, okay? I'm not the doer of the head, the mental system. When it arises, there's no me that it arises to. Great. And then it arises. Yeah? Because there's no doer of it. There's no doer of that mental system. So that conditioned system should be in a program so that it can walk through this life in a lighter stance. Because it's a dualistic mental system. At least from my experience. I can only speak from that, yeah? It's still going to perceive things the same way in many ways. It's just that you're not tied to it. So when the head goes, you don't go with it. But the head is going to go. So in order to keep the head, let's say, tamed down or turned down, going to 12-step programs is super beneficial. And the stuff that we talk about in the talks of not to, if the mental system is too loud, the sense of me cannot be inquired into, and that 12-step program for an addict and alcoholic turns down the mental system. Yeah? So the sense of me in that program is seen as is the word self, small s self, and it pops up all throughout the big book. Self-pity, self-centeredness, it pops up everywhere. It's reliance. It's self-reliance which fails the alcoholic. So the alcoholic is relying on the mental system as that being their mental system. Now it takes a program to turn down that mental system in order to see that when the thinking comes up, they're not the mental system. But if the mental system is too loud, then you cannot inquire into that. So 12-step programs are super beneficial. And then, when you see you're not the mental system, yeah, then the mental system may still present the same ideas. So then a 12-step program is still useful, and the 12-step program will continue to be useful because it will put that body into service to other alcoholics, which will keep it quiet. Yeah? Not by suppressing it, but by giving the body and the mind a program to operate under, so that its conditioning doesn't go off, let's say. So the 12-step programs, in my humble opinion, are useful front to back for the beginner and for the long time. Because what is alcoholic is the mental system. Yes? You are not the mental system. When the mental system arises, it's not arising to a you. Will that change the mental system? I don't know. You see what happens to you. Yeah? But for a lot of alcoholics and addicts, that mental system is still going to move alcoholically. It's still going to perceive the world, let's say, as scary or something. Yeah? So it's nice to be in a program with a bunch of other people who see that way, because it tames that movement. And then that body can walk through this life lighter. And then if it sees that it's not this life in many ways, from its true nature, it can walk through even lighter. And then on the back end of that program, it's in service to the new people. Nisha D. How does one use the mental system to work for us versus against? I don't know. How do you use the mental system to work for you versus against? The interesting thing, in my experience, is seeing that you're not the mental system. You see that it's mostly working, at least from, I shouldn't say mostly, but a lot of the time my head is working against the body. Yeah? So seeing that you're not it, you can stop going with it. But I don't know how to train the head to work for you. I don't know anything about that. You have to go to a different thing for that, I guess. That doesn't work, essentially, from my experience. That's the whole point of this, of Advaita. That's the beauty of Advaita, is that the head is not working for this body. For the most part, it puts this body through hell. Yeah? So if I'm living by if I'm living from the mental system, it's mostly putting the body through way too much stuff. And then trying to make it work for me failed. Forget that. Yeah? It's seeing that you're not the mental system. That when it arises, it's arising to the sense of me. Well, who am I? What is the I? Yeah? And then the mental system can turn way down or not. I don't know what happens to others. My mental system got quieter. A lot quieter. Yeah? But when it comes up, it's still not working for me. It's coming up with its old classics in many ways. You're not enough. You need to make more money. You should be working out more. You should eat less sugar. You should do this. Yeah. The head doesn't work for me. That's what I've come to learn. And then trying to train it to do that is rough. Because there's no doer of that head. It's conditioned. Yeah. So I don't know, if you're in the school, if you're in the practice of trying to make the head work well for you, then you have to go to another thing, I guess. Yeah. Even the 12-step program, it's not about rehabbing self, small s self. It's about seeing that thing doesn't work, essentially, and losing faith in it, putting that faith in a higher power, yeah? But a loss of faith in the individuality gives the individual tons of relief, because the individuality is for the most part trying to overwork the individual a lot. So seeing that you're not an individual, when the head is trying to overwork the individuality, you can just not do it. And yeah, I don't know how to make it work for you. That failed completely for me, so I don't know. Uh-huh. It's beautiful. Life is, the movie of life is like beautiful music, yeah? And then the head comes in and says it's a crappy song. Something like that. Yeah. I don't know, I feel like most spiritual practice and things are based on like what you're saying, Nisha, you know? How do I make the head work for me? How do I get it to see compassionately? How do I make the head non-judgmental? It's a judgmental system, yeah? So stop, see that when it arises, that it's not your head. And then what lays before it is all the compassion and openness. You are already that. It's in seeing what you are not that you land in what you're looking for. Non-judgmental, compassion, oneness, whatever word people are going to try to put on the wordless. Yeah? The working to try to make the head work for me failed completely. Thankfully. That's beautiful that happened, yeah? Because life is like a beautiful movement of music, harmonic in every sense, and then the mental comes in with a bunch of disharmony based on its own interpretation. And then when you see that, the disharmony that the head tries to put into the harmonic movement of life doesn't get a hold. It doesn't get a hold. And it loses its breath. Yeah? Because all the breath that the mental system is getting is from you from before it. So when you stop giving the head meaning as your head, it loses a lot of its breath. Yeah. And then you see the head with all of its judgments and ideas trying to play God with life. Yeah, but it's not God. It's a false God, as Ramana would say. And you have to stop playing God, as they say in recovery. So it's by seeing that you're not that head, and there is no you that it arises to. And then the head loses its breath, because you're no longer stoking the fire of the mental system. But like you could keep trying, you know. You can keep trying to make the head work for you, for sure. And then hopefully it keeps failing. Like this is in recovery, you know. Failing and suffering is like the ultimate teacher in many ways. So you can keep trying to make the head work for you and see if it works. Yeah? But if it fails, it's proving something to you. It's because the head can't do what we're trying to make it do. The body cannot become a not body. The body cannot become open space. The head cannot become open space. It moves through open space. So the more you try to make your head into a not head, let's say, or the more J tries to become a spiritual open J, the more it's going to fail. And that failure is super valuable. It's like in AA suffering from a lot of times the best thing for somebody to do is to try to keep drinking. So that, because that suffering of them not being able to stop is going to convince them of something that they cannot stop. Yeah? That would open a new door through suffering. But like, my head will not, it's not that, at least from my standpoint, the mental system is not good at taking advice until it has to take advice. Until the other things have been, that's why they say recovery is the last house on the block, yeah? Maybe Advaita and the message of not to is the last house on the block. So keep trying to make the head work for you. And when you read books and stuff, trying to become that as an individual, that's what failed. And that's why that's why we're here, yeah? Because Advaita, not to, pointed something out that nothing else pointed out. Non-duality pointed that out to me. What's trying to become what you are not. Yeah? You are not what's trying to become what you are. This is about seeing what you're not and negating it as what you are. And then in that, you see, wow, what I was taking myself to be is not working for me. It's interpreting the world and giving the world meaning from its own stance. Yeah? And you're not even doing that interpretation because there is no doer. It's happening. Events happen and deeds are done, but there's no doer behind that. Yeah.